Hello, good morning. So I am the last person to introduce themselves. So I've been working in Zartis for over 3 years now. And the first 1.5 year of my time in Zartis, I was actually working hand by hand with Simon. So during these 3 years in Zartis, I spent most of the time working in Kaluza, one of our UK clients. And it's very recently that I switched to another of our clients called Rasa. And yeah, the first 1.5 year in Kaluza and Zartis, Simon was my manager. And yeah, I got really good insights from him in our one-to-ones, a lot of inspiration. And that's why I thought it was going to be a great guest for us today. I can tell you a bit about Simon, and then if you want to add something yourself, Simon, would be great. So Simon has a diverse background in the software engineering. He started as a student of design, and then he has experience across a variety of industries, such as visual effects, cloud transformation, climate tech, where we were actually working together in Kaluza, and recently in defense and military simulations. He started his second career as a developer, and this is actually what most of us would see ourselves in. Started his career as a developer, then was a tech lead for 4 years before moving into engineering management, which he started 5 years ago. So, Simon, over to you if you want to add something, and then we can start with the Q&A.
Sure. I think that reading the questions which Angel supplied in advance is really interesting, but I think they're great questions to cover. I think one of the things that I perhaps I quite enjoy the fact that I don't necessarily have a computer science background, if you like. I've worked in other kind of places and worked in other industries where I think bringing some of that, the experiences of other non-software environments to my current experience has been very useful. So hopefully I can talk a little bit about that today. So yeah, I mean, let's just fire into the questions then.
Nice. So everyone has the link in the invite for this meeting to the questions. I'm going to be taking notes. We are going to try to cover something on the 14 questions. So I'm going to have a timer myself. I'm going to be moderating and tell you when we reach a couple of minutes. If we need more time, we have some extra time. But I'll send a message whenever we are close to the 2 minutes. Is that fine?
Yes, good. I'm good. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, then the first question was around how did you work on your soft skills? Was it natural or learned?
Yeah, big question. And there is a bit of overlap with some of these questions, of course. Some of them blend into other ones. But yeah, I think that obviously the soft skills is perhaps something that is almost all of the job. I think, and the more senior you get in management structure, the less kind of direct technical contributions you make, of course. But you still need the technical understanding and to be able to understand the implications of technical decisions. But was it natural or learned? So I think there's a little part which has to be natural. You have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to be friendly and respectful and, communicate. But there's also a lot which can be learned. And I always think there's quite a simple recipe to do this, quite a simple guide to doing this. And that is to be better than people who've managed you. So all the managers that I've had, some are good, some are bad. I copy the good ones and I do the opposite of the bad ones. So, that's quite a kind of helpful guiding principle. Would I like to be managed by me? Like, how would I feel about being managed by me? How would I feel about the way I operate if I was in my team? And I think if you try and look at it from the outside, it's about empathy. So if you can understand the experience of your team members working with you and how you support them, then I think that's a good a good starting point, a good foundation for how you work. But yeah, really, it's, you know, a lot of it is well known in a way. You can read a lot of it in books. I have a couple of recommendations. I think there was some questions about specific books. But yeah, really, it's about empathy and it's about respect. So yeah, really, if you always try and manage yourself in that respect, then that is reflected to others. When you say 2 minutes, Angel, do you mean 2 minutes is gone? 2 minutes left?
Yes, I'm going to be sending like the 2-minute signal, so you know it's on the time. Awesome.
Good.
Well, the next question is, how are you dealing with work-life balance?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I think it's, in a way, I found it since moving from being an individual contributor into more leadership positions, I found it's actually now easier to deal with work-life balance. I think as engineers, we don't just switch off, right? End of the day, your brain doesn't switch off. You're still thinking about the problem you have at work. How am I going to solve this particular software challenge? And I think as a tech lead, it's natural to want to do more and do more and more and more, because you feel that you have more responsibility. You have to prove your new role as a tech lead. And that's burnout territory. So you have to be quite careful there, I think, to every time you take something out on, you have to let something else go. But that's an opportunity for others, right? So if you have a responsibility that you can share with your team, you're empowering your team as well. So I actually then found that engineering management, as a hands-off engineering manager, it was a different sort of problem, where it was kind of easier to switch off a little bit because I wasn't quite so mentally engrossed in the very small technical detail. But it came with a whole new sort of transition where, I mean, you will understand, right? Your job satisfaction is sometimes based around how productive you feel, how much you deliver in terms of features or contributions. You know, that's how we measure ourselves as engineers. Suddenly, as an engineering manager, you're not making those contributions. So I admit, when I became hands-off, I had probably 6 months where I was like, what am I for? Or like, why am I helping? I had a kind of a confidence crisis, I suppose, to be honest. You know, like, what is the contribution that I'm making? And it took me a while to adjust to the new reality. But I think, you know, when I did that, it's about being a force multiplier, a power for good, helping people to achieve their full potential. He's ruthless with the clock, isn't he? He's very, very strict.
An indication if we don't have time to cover them all, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. The next question would be, what tools do you use on a daily basis?
Yeah, okay, tools. I mean, it does depend on the context of the company you're working in. Try and or obviously in terms of the interactions with other with peers and teams. Personally, I think the main tools that I use are a simple Trello board, just to track my own headspace. So I have, you know, my priorities in there. I have what I think might be next. I have a bucket for ideas, just places to keep things. Still use a fair amount of Post-it notes. They're quite good. But I did read something, interestingly, a couple of months ago, that I've begun to try and do more. And that is that the only thing you need to manage your time and manage your priorities is your calendar. So use your calendar as a to-do list, right? There's no point in having a massive to-do list that you're never going to do, or you're never going to get to half of it. So you can use your calendar as a way of like saying, well, okay, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to work on this. At 10:30, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to budget myself 1 hour. That's it. And then you can kind of actually just bang through things, really. And if something interrupts your time, then you move that slot to a better time. And that way you're being realistic, comes back to the work-life balance thing. Being realistic about how much you can get done. You actually have an idea about when you might be able to do things. Okay, that's definitely next week. Put that in the calendar next week. And, you know, it actually, it is hard as an engineering manager. You know, there's a lot of meetings and meetings at short notice. So, you know, you have to be very flexible. That's great. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When did we have that conversation? You know, there's lots of ways of like tracking your work. But yeah, I just find that as an engineering manager, my primary tool is my calendar. So I try and make sure I do as much in there as possible to have it all in one place. I'm going to go ahead on that one, Angel, because
cool. We just reached the time, so yeah, very interesting. Is there any specific books or courses or training that you could recommend?
Yeah, there are. I'm going to post 2 links of 2 of my favorites. So all managers should read it. In fact, this first one, the Manager's Path. First one, Manager's Path. It's really good for anybody who's at any level of seniority at all, even if they're just a senior engineer or tech lead or a manager, because it explains the options. And so it's like, yeah, it does a really good job of explaining the pathways that your career can take. And, you know, it opens your eyes to the good points and the bad points of taking each particular step. So I didn't read it till I've already transitioned into engineering management hands off. And I found it really like resonated with me. It's like, you know, for instance, it would say you get to influence more strategic decisions, but you will probably miss coding and helping your team to deliver on features. So it's quite honest about, you know, the transition that takes place. So I definitely recommend that. And Managing Humans is really, really funny. If you click through that link, there's a little slideshow. And if you click through a couple of things, I think the main one that it says on there, I think it's about 6, 7 in, is basically, don't be a prick, if you excuse my French. Yeah. So it's like, just don't be an idiot, right? Be a manager who someone wants to work with, right? Don't be a prick. Don't be someone who holds people back, you know? I think that's right there, that one. Yeah, that's as simple as that, right? That's the fundamental message, really. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so that's what I'd recommend. I mean, there's lots of training. I've done some sort of training, but mainly, interestingly, training around the subject. So I've done training on like agile and product ownership sides of things. So almost I can speak the language of product ownership better. I didn't want to be a product owner, but I did training to be able to understand who I was interacting with better.
Great, thanks for those links. The next and last question on this block, which was around trainings and learning. How are you staying calm, not panicking, keeping stiff upper lip when things go down?
What does go down mean?
I guess when there is a crisis, a fire somewhere, something screaming that you just need to leave everything and go for that.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's a big question. Your job, but large part, it's true what they say. You know, your job to a large degree is to protect the team. That's kind of one of the fundamental things. So that doesn't mean keeping the team in the dark, but it means making sure that the team only have to worry about things they can actually change, and giving them enough background, enough context to be able to do that, you know, do the right thing, if you like. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not really a panicky sort of person. I kind of, when things are on fire, I shouldn't really say this, but I quite like that sort of thing. It's quite exciting. But yeah, really just if you're calm, then your team will be calm. Because I think as like leaders, we sometimes forget that our team really feed from us. They feed from our emotions, and they feed from our approach to things, especially junior people, right? You know, they don't know, they've never been in this firefighting situation before. They're looking to someone to reassure them, and just by being calm, by explaining things, it will help to make the team calm as well. So yeah.
Okay, then we have the next block, which is people management. The first question is, how are you putting together teams?
So I think this is obviously the most interesting thing, because everybody does engineering management differently. Some people are very technical engineering managers. They might even code. I'm more of the people style of manager. So I definitely want to be involved in the technical side of it. I'm not just a manager. I want to be an engineering manager. But yeah, I think my personal strengths comes in the way building teams, helping them to achieve their potential, performance. So how I'm putting together teams, to answer your question directly. So yeah, again, it depends on the company, because some companies have more flexibility about how you organize and recruit. But what we've been doing recently for new projects is where I've just finished a role at Improbable, and we have a kind of acknowledged fluidity to teams. So people will move around quite a bit. And it's quite complicated, because we're trying to make sure people move around where they want to move around. So we have to look at that. But what we often do is put together a temporary team, see how it works, see how people feel about it, and try and build from there. Sometimes the temporary team is enough to deliver on a specific goal. But yeah, I mean, more generally, I like to make sure that teams have a good balance. So it's having a team which is, say, all mid-level engineers is a bit of a problem. You want a team with balance. You want senior people, mid people, and junior people, because everybody, then there's a mutually beneficial relationship. Like the seniors and the mids support the juniors, but in the process, it's a growth opportunity for those people to actually support more junior people. And likewise, junior people, they come in, they've got fresh eyes, they ask new questions, they ask difficult questions, and that's a really important role as well.
Nice. Next question is, how do you promote people and help them grow?
So yeah, probably most interesting one of this section, actually. So it's two questions really. So how do you promote people? So I think one of the ways that I make an impact as a manager is by sitting down with people, and sometimes outside of the regular one-to-one, maybe we meet for 30 minutes every week. But at some point, when I've got to know them a little bit, I'll say, okay, we're going to have an extra hour this week, and we're just going to talk about your goals. What do you want to do? And then we'll have a session, a dedicated hour, where we'll say, okay, forget everything that's going on. Forget the backlog, forget the roadmap. I don't want to talk about any of that. Let's just talk about what you want to do. What sort of work do you want to be working on? How do you want to develop as a engineer, as a professional? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Really get deep into that sort of stuff. Now, lots of people don't know the answer to those questions, and that's fine. But let's start that conversation. And the remarkable thing is, it comes back to that thing I was saying about just do the opposite of what your bad managers have done, right? It's remarkable how many people say, do you know what? No one's ever asked me that question before. My managers never asked me, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And I find it amazing. So it's a kind of easy way of being a good manager, right? Just care about where people are going, care about what they want to do. And you can then take that and use that information to build out personalized development plan for everybody. And those can be, smart goals. So someone might say, I want to improve my communication skills. To do that, I'm going to deliver 3 sessions, 3 demos at our sprint reviews, and I want to do that in the next 2 months. So, setting clear, concrete goals that are deliverable and achievable. And yeah, I think that's really refreshing for people. As for the promotion thing, it ties into that quite well, because most companies have a probation period, right? So it might be 3 months, it might be 6 months. So I kind of use that probation period to let people settle in and understand what's happening in the company and what opportunities there are for them. And then literally the day after they've been past their probation, I say, okay, let's talk about your promotion. People are like, what? I've just joined. No, what are you talking about promotion? Okay, I'll be clear. This isn't like next week or next month. Sometime in the future, do you want to be promoted? And most people are like, well, yeah. So, okay, well, let's work backwards from that date. So let's look at, if we have a career framework, let's talk about that. Let's work out how to fill in some of the gaps along the way. So just beginning a journey. Maybe it's a 2-year journey, but people feel like they're on the path. And I think people really, really appreciate that sort of directness, to be honest. That's a long one.
Yeah, I left it longer on purpose, because you were right. It's a 2 question in one. Awesome. Then next, can you describe your responsibilities today, defining your scope, the scope of your position?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Yeah, because sometimes you sort of think, I have to admit that sometimes I do get to the end of the week and think, what have I really done this week concretely? But it's not really that's the point, right? You're not necessarily doing stuff. You're creating the conditions in which work can get done, and that people can be productive. And that's kind of what I measure myself on. How do the team feel? What's the feedback and peak on? What's the work rate, the velocity of the team look like? Is that trending up, trending down? There's lots of kind of metrics you can use. So yeah, the responsibility for me is, in the slightly abstract, it's about nurturing the team, but in the more concrete, it's probably it's often quite delivery focused. Work with the team, understand the bottlenecks, and try and improve our process of estimation, which is always imperfect, always wrong to some degree. That's fine. And also, it does depend on the situation. At Improbable, it's very much scale up territory. So the scale up environment being one where there's a lot of uncertainty, there's many pivots, there's a low signal to noise ratio, if you know what I mean. So we have to navigate quite a complex environment of almost predicting customer requirements and things. So I think part of my role is also about trying to do that, to stop the team having to worry about that, like I say, to shield the team again.
Okay. And next question is, how do you deal with product people when they come with the roadmap versus your own tech roadmap?
Yeah, always interesting one, isn't it? I think it's fine. It's just about expectation management. It's about making sure that you've got the relationships with your team, but also the relationships with those other departments, be it product or business development or whatever, where they trust and believe you when you say we need to slow down to speed up, for instance, or part of our system has become unsustainable and we need to address some technical debt. and really making sure that you're able to explain the value of doing that. Every time, I think again, it really depends on the individuals involved in the product. Some of them are very technical, and they will understand that every time we add a feature, we're adding complexity, we're adding risk, we're adding a maintenance overhead. And there's a balance there between sort of making something sustainable, making something and making something that addresses the business need. I think one of the things we do like to do quite a lot is is get people into a sort of experimental mindset. So do experiments where we can do small engineering investments in proposed ideas and then measure the value as quickly as possible. And that almost sometimes allows everybody to feel that product roadmap decisions are worth investing in, but sometimes also allows us to have bandwidth to do our engineering tasks as well. And that maybe is as concrete as like, we are say 20% of every sprint is engineering time. The rest of the 80% maybe it's product development. But that can change. So yeah, it's a conversation. And I think really it's about expectation management. We have things that we need to do as engineers as an engineering function. And as long as your product team are on board with that, okay.
Interesting topic, expectation management. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. The last question in this blog would be how much you can push as a manager. And there is a comment like influence and persuading others.
Yeah, so I recommend looking up about nudges, like nudges as a style. So I would say, yeah, if you go to like there's lots of stuff on the web about different sort of leadership styles, but I think it definitely naturally fall into the more of the servant leadership approach. So I don't want to be necessarily the dominant voice in the team. I'm not the best engineer in my team. My job is to find the best engineers and get them in my team. I don't have to be the best engineer. If I'm the best engineer, we have a problem. Okay. So yeah, my approach is more about that. What can I do to help them be better? How can I inspire them? How can I provide the information they need? But also, how can I gently like push them? So how can I get people to, even like the personal goals, right? Pushing people to set goals. Let's do this together. And people are like, okay, I'll give it a try. Some people are very cynical, but most people come on board in time. So yeah, going on, pushing people outside the comfort zone. And this idea of nudges is where you're not necessarily saying you need to do this or that. You say, just planting seeds in people's heads. Have you tried this? Have you thought about it from their point of view? It'd be great if someone was to take ownership of this piece of work. I wonder who that might be. So, so you're not. And I think people would react well to that sort of approach because they're not being told what to do. They're being given new options that they might not have thought about. Yeah, so I like that sort of approach. I think I've had good feedback about that because it means that you can help steer things without being an authoritative figure, which actually is counterproductive.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm just taking the last note. So we are opening the last block now.
Okay.
Which is people performance. How are you keeping track of people's progress, including yourself? Any specific OKRs, milestones?
Yeah, I think that comes back to those personal goals, I would say, because I think progress is a broad thing. It could be like how much work are they doing, or it could be how are they developing as an individual, as an engineer. I think that the second of those is by far the most important. If you spend a little bit of time making sure that having those conversations about personal objectives, goals, how people are feeling about where they're at in that journey, then it may feel like that's time you should have been building features, but actually that's going to make people build features faster, be more happy, be more productive, stay in the business. You know, the worst thing, right, is people leaving. You've got to find replacements, you've got to interview, you've got to train people. That's a big time sink. If you make people feel valued, make people feel appreciated, you know, it's like everybody in the business is important. No matter how senior or how junior or how long they've been at the company, everybody is important. And if everybody feels important, they will come to work, want to come to work. And if you have a team like that, then they do amazing things. So you don't necessarily need to be, I don't think you need to be like cracking a whip, you know, to like make people work harder. You need to create the right conditions and they will do it anyway. That's how I look at it.
Great. Next, how do you keep people accountable?
Yeah. Again, that's a broad subject. So I read quite a lot of books because you know, I buy more books than I have time to read, unfortunately. So I keep them nearby, hoping that I'll somehow absorb the information without having to read them. But I read quite a lot of books just to get new ideas, because to keep fresh. And I read an interesting book called Legacy, I think. Legacy. I think it's a book about the All Blacks in, you know, the New Zealand rugby team. Okay, now they have been very successful for like 50 years or 100 years or something. Now, that's not just because of the individuals in the team. They're doing something which they're doing something special. So this book is a sort of analysis of that and how it fits into like management and business and what's the magic there. It's really interesting because it has this core concept of a team of leaders. So it's like the idea that everybody in the team is accountable. Everybody in the team has the authority to step up at any time to help out. And as tech leads and as engineering managers, I personally think it's really important that we make that authority, we give that authority to the team, and we make space for people to exercise that authority. So it might be, maybe there's something's on fire, there's an outage, and maybe a junior engineer thinks they know how to fix it. Maybe they should fix it because, you know, why not? They may not feel enough authority to be able to do that. So it's a really interesting idea. This, you know, it's not all funneled. It's not very hierarchical. In concrete terms, I've done that by, we have like epic leads. We have team leads, but we have epic leads as well. So the epic lead might be a junior engineer or anyone in the team. And they're accountable for that. And someone else is accountable for that. The tech lead is kind of a bit accountable for everything, but they're trying, you know, they're supporting. If you have a team which is everyone supporting each other, then that's how you build high performance.
Really nice. Then the last two questions is, how do you motivate people if you feel you covered or you want to add something here?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have covered it really. Yeah.
I think all those ideas about making accountable or clear examples.
Yeah.
In the previous question, the epic lead role. Yeah, I think we can skip this.
Yeah.
But because the next one, it's actually on the other side. How do you address lack of performance?
So you've ended on
Example.
the negative. Ended on the negative. have you?
Exactly. So there are a few examples here. Someone not being, especially in a remote work, not being reachable. Their tasks take a lot of time in comparison to other members.
Yeah, obviously that's massive, like broad topic. Yeah, it's depends on the company as well, because some companies have sort of structures in place to manage performance, I suppose. But I always think there's a couple of things to think about, and I'm sure many of you know this. The idea that, say, you have a annual review or a half-year review, nothing in that review should be a surprise. Nothing. People should not turn up to their review and find out they haven't been performing. It's an ongoing conversation. So we need to, as managers, if we do nothing else, the one thing we have to do is our one-to-ones. And I pledge to people that you will have a one-to-one every week. It might have to move, and I really don't want it to move the time, but you will definitely have a one-to-one this week, because if you don't have one, you're basically saying, sorry, you're not important, I've got something better to do. And that's a bad signal. So in those one-to-ones, that's really the point where you're building trust, you're understanding what's going on with people. And sometimes there are good reasons why people aren't performing. I had a senior engineer, one of my most senior engineers, who was definitely, something had changed with them. They were very like you say, unavailable remotely. They were low engagement, and I literally had to just really call them out on it, really, and say, what's going on. And they admitted that they had things going on outside of work. They had like a relationship problem in the middle of trying to move house. And I said to him, you need to just take a bit of time to sort this out. I don't mean like take a week off, but it's okay. It's okay for people not to be burning at 110% all the time. He was a great engineer. If he needs a couple of weeks at like 70% just to like get him through his crap going on, fine, do what you got to do. And then and then he came back and he's sorted his things out. He's back on firing on all cylinders, as they say. And sometimes people need a bit of support, really, and humanity, really. So, but yeah, I mean, there'll come a time where obviously some people are just not doing the work. They're hiding behind the remoteness or whatever. But I think it's still part of the conversation. It's about being candid with them, and saying, there's expectations that you're required to reach. So here's where you're not meeting those expectations. So make it clear, evidence-based, and but also, like I say, compassionate. So help if they need help them. If they're just being lazy, then explain to them how things have to change and track that. So I don't think I've ever had anyone put on a personal improvement plan, because I think if you get to the problem early, then you can either course correct or provide the support that people need.
Oh, we're just on time. This has been an amazing session, Simon. I don't know if we have time. I know we are on time, but probably if someone wants to just stick a question, some clarification. Simon, do you have 5 more minutes?
I'm free till 10, yeah.
All right. Then, I don't know, some people is going to other meetings, but is there something, any of the the audience would like to ask Simon, clarify, or just comment?
Well, I'm going to ask something.
Awesome.
Have you ever think about go back to full development? I mean, get rid of the management style and say, okay, I don't want to manage people again. I just want to make codes 100 of the time. Yeah,
that's a really good question. Yeah. I think sometimes definitely yes. But I actually think, like I said, I think that it's possible. Now I've got used to the idea of not coding professionally. I'm happy with that, and I do recognize that when you're coding, you have an area of influence of a certain size. I think as a manager, you may not be changing lines of code, but your area of influence is much bigger, so you can like steer the ship a little bit more rather than working in the engine room, for instance. So yeah, it's a different bubble, if you like, that you operate in. And I think if I went back to coding, I would miss the big picture stuff. But it's possible to do a bit of both. So maybe there's a way. Having said that, I do still code in my own time, and I have my own projects going on with friends, and I think that helps scratch the itch, if so allows me to still feel like I'm engaged and in touch with the latest ideas and technical approaches. So yeah, try and do both, even if not professionally.
Great. Michal, you want to add something?
Yeah, first of all, Simon, thanks for participating. I think it was very inspirational. I do have a question, because what I noticed in your answers is that you mentioned quite often, being close to your emotions, empathy, compassion, right? So this is something I picked up from your answers. And here's my question: how do you find yourself working, with people, and here I mean engineers, mostly men, who are, at least that's my experience, can be a bit far from those things, right? Can be a bit detached from those things. Their code, their progress, their technical. So is that your experience as well? And how do you deal with that? How do you find yourself dealing with that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, for sure. Yes, it's not a generalization to say that that engineers are not the most communicative people. But I think to me, that just takes a little longer to build up the trust and the communication. But it's also about and maybe not from the first time you meet someone, but actually those people always have something that they want to talk about. It may be World of Warcraft or baking bread. It may be, there's something that they are passionate about. So talk about that, talk about that and be open yourself, turn up to the meeting and say, oh, had a terrible weekend, my cat died or whatever. So, just if you're open, people open up as well. But it can take a little bit of time. I mean, I do have the opposite extreme as well, where I have people who come to one-to-ones and they have a list of things they want to talk about, and we're like, right, go. Number one, number two, number three. So it works both ways. But yeah, I would say just talk to people about what they want to talk about. Try and dig into that a little bit. But if people don't want to talk about personal things, just talk about work things. And I try and frame things in a way, try and frame the conversation in a way that will interest them. Maybe it's not even interesting to me at all, but it's for their benefit, really. But maybe just ask people like, what's the challenge here? Why was that hard? What was the, really dig into something that they're talking about or they've been working on. And then you begin to think, okay, well, this person is actually more interested in learning about open source. I didn't know that before. So, just, finding different angles to engage with people is probably the best way. Good question.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. Okay, unless someone has something else to add, we should be wrapping up at this time.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's really, really great opportunity to meet you all.
Simon, it's been a pleasure. Personally, seeing you again after a couple of years, and that you took the time to talk to us.